Everybody ready? Ladies, you ready? You ready, my friend? You want to count me down or anything, or you just... I'm good, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It is 7:01. I am going to call to order the Wednesday, February 15th meeting of the North Andover Finance Committee. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be terrific. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I see that we do have a quorum here, so we have some visitors tonight, some very special visitors, our town manager and town finance director, and they're going to go through the budget. We're going to vote on the capital improvement plan, but we'll start with public comment, and I don't see anyone here for public comment. So that brings us right to the town manager's recommended fiscal year 24 budget as presented by our esteemed town manager, Melissa Rodriguez.
Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming in.
We are competing with a bunch of other meetings tonight. We got CPC and the Master Plan Implementation Committee, so maybe everybody is there. I don't know,
that could be.
It's possible.
Well, usually we have Stan, at least, so he must be somewhere more important.
Well, he's on the Master Plan Implementation
Oh, there you go.
Committee,
All right.
So maybe he'll come in late. Yes, but there's a lot of competition.
All right.
So this is the fiscal year 24 town manager's recommended budget. Just a little bit for the people who are new to our budget process. What we basically do when we create the budget is Lynn sends out budgetary forms to all of our department heads, and we give guidance to the school department on their spending as well. We collect those forms back with their budget requests. We have we call them budget hearings to make all the department heads nervous, but they're really just an informal meeting where we talk about their requests. They give us information.
Don't tell them your
about-
secrets. This is on TV,
They
Melissa.
They know. They give us information about kind of what they're looking for, if there's any new initiatives. They often will give us data about where they've been as a department for the year. They work on their mission statements and their goals. They submit all of those. After we meet with all the departments is when we kind of get down to business and start talking about what the budget's going to look like as a whole, and often that involves, unfortunately, making cuts from what has been requested. So the chart I'm showing you right now is the fiscal year 24 budget revenue chart. So we are presenting a balanced budget. It is within capacity as determined by our forecasting exercises and additional information we've learned since then. This does include the consideration of the advice of the Revenue and Fixed Costs Committee, which, as you know, is very involved in making recommendations about what our revenue will look like as we move forward in the process. This $130 million number includes our transfers to stabilization accounts and our funding of capital using free cash. So it's a very comprehensive number. It takes into account every single dollar we're going to be using to fund our budget at town meeting. Just a little bit about what this means, because sometimes I think people get confused, but what's a charge for service? What's a license and permit? So when you look at the other taxes grouping, that's motor vehicle excise tax, that's meals tax, that's penalties and interest, and that's our pilot with the Housing Authority.
Thank you.
Charges for service, that's the solid waste fees, that's our ambulance fees, and other fees like building permit fees. Under licenses and permits, that's our burial permits, it's whatever we get in for food permits, it's gas permits, and it's our liquor licensing permits. Miscellaneous revenue is our cell phone tower revenue that we get in. We have some RFPs from town land where we are entered into leases with cell phone tower companies. So that comes from those leases. It's fines, it's interest income, which excitingly we're starting to see improve after kind of a rough year, the last year or two. And it's our host community annual fee, which we have with our trash company. The all other sources is really interfund, so it's stuff that we're transferring internally between our different budgets. So telling you a little bit about what our revenues for fiscal year 24 look like. It's a total of $123 million. It's a 4.34% increase from the last fiscal year, not including the free cash for reserves and capitals. Okay. So when we talk about building our budget, we try not to use free cash as a revenue source for anything that is a continuing cost, because that would create a structural deficit. So we use things when we're talking about our appropriating budget that we know we're going to see year to year. Our property taxes are estimated to grow by 4.61%, it's about $4.2 million. Our local receipts are increasing by 6.4%. If I could put like 20 exclamation points after that, I would, because it's very exciting, because we actually have seen a decrease for the last 2 years. So 2 years ago, our local receipts decreased by almost $400,000. Last year, they decreased by $60,000. So when you really think about that, it's almost a $1.3 million increase from where we were 2 years ago. And a lot of that was due to COVID.
And prior to the decrease, what were they increasing by in the prior maybe 2 years?
Probably 3 to 4%.
Okay, so this is so those exclamation points are
we're
warranted.
getting back on track.
Yeah.
We're seeing this is a $701,000 increase.
Okay.
So it was a tough point. I mean, things that we're suffering, and we talked about, kind of as funny, but we saw passport revenue completely gone, right? Because people weren't traveling.
Right.
Like silly little things like that, but it added up, and it really did have an impact on our budget. And so we were able to offset a lot of that through new growth and other ways. And other communities really, I think, had it a lot worse. For instance, a community like Andover, who has $1.5 million in hotels tax, saw their local receipts really affected.
Right.
We are both blessed and not blessed by not getting hotels tax, I guess, but we still had that effect. And local aid, per our policies and procedures, is level funded. So what we do is we level fund local aid every year, and then the following year we match what the governor's budget and what the Senate Ways and House end up voting on. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, we're not in sync with the state budget process. You would think we would get there, but we're not. So they make their decision pretty much after we've already voted at town meeting. So it's kind of impossible for us to know. There has been conversations that there will be more local aid this year. There was more local aid last year because of gaming. But I think at this point, it's really unknown. So we're all just kind of waiting. There's also,
early.
right, a lot of the time when the local aid goes up, our assessments by the state go up too.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of take that into account. So I just want to talk a little bit about new growth and what that is. So for the people at home who maybe haven't really been involved in a municipal budget before, there's a state law called Proposition 2.5 that allows the town to raise 2.5% of the tax levy every year, automatically. You could budget, your taxes can go up by 2.5%. We're also allowed to have new growth, and that's any new construction. So that's improvements or new buildings. Up until literally last week, we had forecasted $2 million in new growth. Then we had a unfun surprise, and now we know we're only going to have $1 million in new growth. So we had to make cuts last week in order to balance the budget. That is because of delays for the Amazon personal property. So if you remember, the town has adopted a local option that allows us to capture our real estate property at the percentage done by June 30th. But for personal property, it's January 1st. So January 15th. So when we did our walkthrough of Amazon, we realized that they were not going to have all of their personal property done due to delays in supply. They're actually only going to have about $400,000 of it compared to the $2 million that we thought we'd be getting in the growth. So it's both good and bad. It means that we'll have additional new growth in fiscal year 25, but it means that we won't be seeing it this year. We talked a little bit with the select board on Monday night, and they said, what challenges do you see budgeting moving forward?
That was my
right?
next question.
And the challenges that we see, I think, moving forward is that we've all grown a little bit, I think, accustomed to higher new growth over the last couple of years. We've had really significant new growth. It's been great. I don't think we'll continue to see that. We don't have a lot of big projects coming on right now. So I think we will probably go back to the 2017, 2018, $750,000 number. So getting people in that mindset of, we're not going to have fives, right? Is going to be hard. But it's a conversation that we're having already, so that people won't be surprised next year.
Good.
So just a reminder about last year's new growth. Last year was weird, right? So we had the $6.7 million in new growth. We used $3.6 million of it as a one-time revenue source. We did that purposefully because we did not want to be in a situation this year. Sorry, my thing is going away. Where we were having taxpayers taking on the burden of Amazon's TIF going into effect. We don't know yet if Amazon's TIF will go into effect. It will depend if they're at their occupancy by June 30th. There's a chance there will be, there's a chance there won't be. I keep joking that we were like in a race with them with the senior center. We are going to win. It's both a good and bad thing. But they are having some supply chain issues that could push them past that June 30th deadline.
So can you talk a little bit about what the ramifications of both scenarios are?
Sure. So if they do not get their occupancy permit by June 30th, if the TIF does not go into effect, the tax increment financing does not go into effect for fiscal year '24, they'll get a normal tax bill for whatever they have built. If they do get their occupancy permit by June 30th, then their tax bill will be reduced to 20%. It's 20% for 2 years, 40% for 2 years, 60% for 2 years, 80% for 2 years, and then goes to 100% in the 10th year. So that means that they'll be paying less, right?
Yep.
So if we took all of this new growth and we raised it, right, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're leaving on the table. And we talked last year a lot about the 2 balloons and how Amazon was taking all the air and the residential balloon was kind of deflating. But then when the TIF came into effect, they were going to let that air out and it was going to go into the residential balloon, right? So what we don't want to do is we don't want to make the residential balloon explode, right?
Right.
Like, we're very leery about the residential balloon. So we want to make sure that we're leaving capacity out of respect for the rest of the taxpayers. And so we're doing that purposefully, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means and what that looks like coming further in the slide.
Perfect. Thank you.
So this is just a chart that kind of shows you our revenue. It's an interesting chart. You can see that about 73% of our budget is paid through property taxes. And what's even more interesting than that is that about 87% of that is residential. So really, a lot of our budget is paid by the residents of North Andover. So when people talk a little bit about, why don't we have the same revenue as Andover, which is a question I hear a lot, right? Why is Andover's budget so much bigger? It's because we just don't have that commercial base. And I think a lot of people maybe are confused. They'll say, oh, we're getting all these new apartment buildings, but those apartment buildings are taxed at the residential rate, right? So even though we may be getting large buildings coming on, they're paying that residential tax rate, so they're still in that grouping.
Yep.
So this talks a little bit about the fiscal year '24 budget expenditures. So you can see this is $128 million budget. This is all in again. This includes our state assessments. So, we pay to the MBTA, we pay for charter schools. This includes all of the capital expenditures that you'll be seeing. The only thing that's not included in this grouping is water and sewer. So we'll talk about that in a little bit in the enterprise funds. So just talking a little bit about what our budget looks like and what the breakdown is. Our budget for education has always kind of hovered between the 45% and the 50% of the budget. It's not really a true number when you look at it because the school budget also has the benefits and the shared cost.
Right.
So the education budget is really more like 70% of our total budget. But it's a helpful thing to see. The next bigger thing really is our benefits line. Which is interesting, but benefits also includes things like our liability insurances and our building insurance.
And I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you, but
no.
and I know you'll probably get into this later, and we'll have the school folks in at a later date too. But the education 47.8%, and given the caveats you put on them, how is that in relation to last year's?
It's about the same.
Same,
A
okay,
little bit
that's-
more. I actually just ran a chart about the percentage increases over the last few years, and I can show it to you after if you want. But it usually hovers between 45 and 48.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
No problem. So this talks a little bit about what the budget expenditure breakdown is. So the fiscal year '24 budget has a 3% increase in departmental spending, excluding the reserves. Municipal departments are at 5.7%. One thing that's really interesting about the municipal budget is that the fire and police department are having an absorption of 3 years of contracts negotiations. So they both settled contracts and they were both all out of contract. And you remember last year the police left civil service at town meeting. That was part of their contract. So it's a bigger than normal impact because you're seeing all 3 years of their now salaries and benefits in this one budget cycle. We had budgeted for it previously in reserves, but now it's being transferred in there.
Gotcha.
The shared services is increasing by 33%. Sounds like it's huge, but it's a very small budget, so when we make changes in there, it just looks really big.
Okay.
And then the education budget is increasing by 5.5%. So I always do the percentage and the amount because people are always just interested in it in a different way. So the municipal budget is increasing by about 2.3 million, and the school budget is increasing by 3.1 million.
The shared services, is that the IT department that you put a little bit more money into?
It's, so what we did was, so it's IT, that's IT and facilities,
Yeah.
really, and purchasing are those. What we did was we transferred, and I'll talk about it a little bit in our budget highlights, but we moved all of the electricity bills into one
Oh.
budget. So what was
Oh.
happening, and you remember we did this with postage last year
Yeah.
and gasoline. We have these weird systems, or and most municipalities do, where there's kind of ownership. People have ownership over things.
Yep.
So everyone was getting their own electricity bill, and
Yep.
then we're paying it. And the only reason it became kind of problematic this year, other than I think it's not very efficient, is that because people were so unsure about electricity rates, we got budgets, some people increased by 2%, and then someone else increased by almost 60%.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, we need some rhyme or reason in
Yeah.
these increases here. So we pulled them all and brought them into the
That
shared
makes so
services
much
budget.
sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Who knows, maybe some savings down the road for that too.
well, so the town has its own rate.
Yeah.
We, not even with the residents, we actually partner with other municipalities. So it makes sense. We're
Yeah.
actually able to,
The bigger the pool,
yeah, we're able to calculate very closely what our bills will be, but the individual department heads don't know to do that. And additionally, we have the solar credits,
Yeah.
which really Lynn has access to. So it's not really fair the department heads to be kind of throwing
Yeah.
darts at a dartboard that they don't know what the dartboard looks like.
So the individual, like in the schools, the individual, they don't have to even think about that, does all the billing and everything go towards you now? I
So
mean,
it's all in facilities, it's all in, so Steve is
Okay.
shared services.
oh, that's great.
Yes, poor Steve, who is a saint and
Yes.
handles so many things, may not think it's great.
Yeah.
But we told him we will support him in moving it all forward. But, you know, we were doing with gasoline, we were literally sending ourselves bills, right? We were
Yeah.
billing ourselves for water.
Right.
You know, and it just was like this silly, yeah, just
I mean,
moving
that's all that administrative work, which is just completely unnecessary. So.
all this work for Lynn, really. So, right? Yeah, so if we can streamline processes, we're all about trying to do that.
Great.
So,
Cool.
Yeah. So just a little bit about health insurance. So you know we joined the GIC in 2014. We used to be self-insured. So what that means is that we had our employees actually paid into an account. If they went to the doctors, we actually got the bills ourselves in town and we paid them. It's not a very great system, so we joined the GIC. We have only roughly the same budget 10 years later, which is great. About half of our health insurance budget is school employees. The remaining half is retirees and town employees, which makes sense because they have about 600 employees and we only have 261, right? So this was an exceptionally interesting year to budget this. The GIC tomorrow is voting rates, so we kind of are in the dark trying to guess. But then in addition to all of that, we actually have a new employee agreement this year too. So every 3 years, we have to negotiate a new employee agreement since we left the GIC by state law. So we had changed some of the contribution rates. Basically what had happened was that when 3 or 6 years ago when they did this, they had one rate for employees who came before 2012 and another whole rate for employees who came after 2012. Making it very difficult to manage, but also making it so that employees were kind of pitted against each other, which is not great. So we tried to fix that the best that we can, but we're also introducing an opt-out program. So employees who are with the town's insurance for 2 years can get a financial benefit if they choose to opt out of our insurance. So it's $2,000 for an individual, $4,000 for a family, which will lead to savings for the town between $10,000 to $15,000 for each opt-out. So we kind of had to guess a little bit, I think, on what this budget's going to end up looking like. But I think it's going to be a huge benefit for the employees to have this, and a benefit to the town for the opt-out program. So,
And that's more in line with what you see in the private sector,
oh, for sure.
too.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Self-insured, you were way too small of a company to be self-insured.
yeah. So being self-insured is a huge risk.
We went,
Yeah.
red
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
boy, we fought.
for a long time, and then we finally
Yeah.
went the other way, and once we went the other way. we
Yeah.
won,
I
luckily.
remember fighting to get into the GIC.
Yeah. And you have to get stop-loss insurance if you're self-insured. I mean, it's really, yeah, it's a lot.
All
So,
it took was one
Catastrophic.
employee
One
to
does.
have some
Very
poor
low.
child with
Yeah.
cancer, and it
Yeah.
just
yeah,
blew it up.
Skyrocketed.
it does.
One.
I mean, I can't even imagine having
We had a
been,
year with several.
yeah.
Yeah, I know,
Several.
I remember, and it was
Yeah.
just like, this is
Yeah.
nuts, so.
I
anyway.
can't imagine having been self-insured during COVID and what that
Oh,
like,
that
would have
would've
been
been bad.
terrible. So, you know,
yeah.
being in the GIC has been very beneficial for
Yeah,
us.
It just makes a lot of sense.
But it will be interesting to see the vote tomorrow. So this is the town staffing headcount. It shows that we're going up one employee. It's actually not. It's additional hours for different employees that kind of add up. We count everybody together, so it's not like really a whole person. But I'm going to get into what those people are in a minute, a half people or a quarter person. But whenever we do bring a new employee on, which we're not, but whenever we do bring a new employee on, we make sure that that employee is completely accounted for. So we include their OPEB costs, their health insurance, their workers' comp, their Medicare. It's an all-in approach, and that's roughly usually between $17,000 to $18,000 on average.
So it shows that the headcount's basically flat, and maybe you'll talk about this later, but does that necessarily mean each department is also flat, or are there any adds in one being offset by subtracts in another?
No, we're really not making
Okay, so
any
it's flat
changes on the town
between every
side.
individual
Yeah.
department,
And this is really the changes. So we talked about the electricity and the heating fuel. For the fourth year in a row, we'll have your reserve funded at the 1.5 million. We do have salary reserves again for our unsettled collective bargaining agreement. So we will be negotiating with 2 units, clerical and library.
Okay.
Those are the 2 units we have right now. So what we do basically is we build reserves within the budget so that we don't have to go back to town meeting to ask for additional money to fund our contracts once we settle them. Our cost of living increases at 2%. So these are the increased hours. In assessing, we're increasing hours for the data collection position. So if you remember correctly, last year we actually put this person in the budget to start. We're entering a reevaluation year, which is every 3 years, which means that basically we have to go through every property cyclically and evaluate the houses, make sure we're getting the right assessments. She's been amazing, so we're looking to increase her hours. We're looking to increase the hours for the van driver. So the van driver, we've actually seen a 33% increase in the usage for the senior center van. I anticipate we may see even more increased usage when the new center opens. But it's really been amazing. And actually, so we've seen a 33% increase since the program started in 2018. But since we reopened it since COVID, we saw a 77% increase. Wow. Yeah, from when people right before COVID were using it to now. So it's really been interesting. They've a lot of energy, and they're using it for a lot of new things, like not just what they were using it for before, which was, grocery shopping.
Yeah.
They're going a lot of different places now, so it's been really great.
Good.
We're looking to increase the hours for our human resources department. We currently have a part-time position that we have through a grant. Our HR best practices say that you should have 2.5 employees for every 100 employees. We have 2.5 employees for 261. They're amazing, but they know they need a little bit extra help. So just to give you an idea, in 2022, we hired 112 people through the town. 20 were full-time, 9 part-time, and 83 temporary employees. So they do all the hiring for Rick Gorman for the summer program. So it is a lot. They posted 26 jobs. And right now, we're trying to get started on a compliance audit. So basically, we want to go through every HR file and make sure there's nothing in anyone's HR file that shouldn't be in their HR file. So we're looking forward to getting that going as well. So we'll be doing that. And then for public safety, this isn't, I told you about the implementation of the 3 vehicles, but the 3 years. But we also have, through Amazon, we had brought a second fire prevention officer in, and Amazon was paying for it, and has been paying for it. Because basically, when you're building a building as big as the Amazon building, you need to have somebody from fire and the building department down there all the time. We actually have a trailer on site where we keep all of our files and everything. It was part of the development agreement. But what has happened is that second fire prevention officer has been such a huge asset. So we have had at least 2 situations where they have actually discovered propane tanks that were not ever licensed.
Oh, wow.
They've just been amazing. They've been going into businesses, they've been doing all kinds of routine checks, and it's been such a huge asset. That's something we'd like to continue. And so we were actually able to do that pretty much within their budget, which has been great. And then the kind of biggest thing that contributes to the increase, because like I said, these are all pretty small, is just due to supply costs. So really what you're seeing is DPW, and you'll see it when we talk about the water budget as well. Things just are costing more, I'm sure you know, but asphalt's expensive, right? And these things that we are not used to paying for, salt it's amazing that it hasn't snowed, but
Right.
we're almost deficit spending just because of filling the salt tank shed has been so expensive. So just that cost of those supplies, fuel, the cost of our supplies have just been so crazy.
Yeah.
Even the mechanic. I mean, it's just been more than we've ever paid for anything. And it's interesting because there was an article today in our Mass Municipal magazine where the mayor of Rivera was saying, you know, if local aid is even just 1.6 or 2% increase, it's going to be, it's a deficiency for all of us because of how much we're paying for supplies right now. So that's a lot of the increases that you'll see when you look through the budget. Our trash contract will be coming up, so we accounted for what we think we'll see for an increase for trash as well.
There was recently a trash change or something, right?
It was they got bought out.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Republic bought JRM.
That's right.
Yeah. So
That's right. There's a couple bumps in the road
we
there.
had some bumps, but it's better now.
Yes.
Thank God. So speaking of levy capacity, so we are leaving $2.3 million on the table. This is purposeful, right? We're leaving it there for three real reasons. This was the capacity that Amazon brought on last year due to their TIF not being in effect. If the TIF goes into effect, we don't want to have this negatively affect taxpayers, right? So that's basically, if you take the 2.6 and then you take their first TIF payment, what we anticipate it would be, it gets us to that number that we had held. And if you remember correctly, basically what we did with that money last year was we transferred it to the capital stabilization account so we could use it for the design of the Kittredge.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why. And we need to save this capacity to adequately implement Facilities Master Plan 2.
Right.
So if you guys remember when I presented Facilities Master Plan 2 to you, I have this crazy chart, and it shows kind of all these different funding sources we're going to use to bring on not just the debt, but also the operating costs for Facilities Master Plan 2. And there is operating costs not just for what the building's going to be, right? Like we might need more custodial, and there's going to be additional electrical. But there's also staffing costs that go along with, in addition to the middle school, that go along with an entire new Kittredge, that go on in addition to Franklin. So we use this $2.2 million over the 10-year period as the Amazon TIF goes away in order to implement Facilities Master Plan 2. So if we did not do this now, if we did not save this money, we would have a serious problem with implementing Facilities Master Plan 2 for the operating side. So I think I know sometimes people are like, well, leaving all this money on the table, and I get that, but it's very purposeful on why we're doing it. We're also watching very closely the tax rate. So like I said before, we really think that Amazon may have even underinflated residential tax bills last year. Like they may have taken on so much that people's tax bills were less than they could have been last year. And so we're just being really cognizant because we don't want people to feel too affected. And so we're watching that very closely, but we won't have more information on that until the fall, because that's when we'll know the values.
Okay.
Okay. So just quickly about the sewer and enterprise fund budget, that budget's actually decreasing by $162,413. Some debt is coming off. We are forecasting that our rates will remain the same for the 12th consecutive year. But I will say again that if the Greater Lawrence sewer rate does continue to increase, and there is some thoughts that they may end up doing a large capital project, we could see the need to increase rates in the future. Any increases here, because the debt's coming off, you will see increases in some of the line items are due to supply and demand issues for materials. The retained earnings in the sewer enterprise fund budget is $5.9 million. So retained earnings for an enterprise fund budget are like the free cash for the enterprise fund.
And what is the capital project that GLSD is thinking about?
So they've been talking for a while about redoing some things at the plant.
Okay.
They haven't taken any vote. They haven't brought any plans forward,
Yeah.
but they've been kind of brewing it
Mulling
for
it
a while.
around, yeah. Okay,
So,
thanks.
and then for water, that budget is going to be increasing by $801,000 to $5.6 million. Again, the water rates will not be changing at all for this 12th consecutive year. We have asked DPW to start working on a staffing plan. So DPW is very small. There are 40 employees. We see the need to kind of bolster that over the next 5 to 10 years if we can. So we've asked them to start looking at that. They've had a lot of trouble with filling vacancies, like we have in basically all of our departments, unfortunately, right now. But so they really wanted to start in the enterprise fund budget because they know that these are positions that are highly sought. So their plan is to bring on a staff engineer, and the staff engineer would really kind of relieve our need to be relying on a consultant so heavily for the water department, and then one laborer, so one water laborer. And then this just gives you an idea of where our revenues come from for our enterprise accounts, and you can see mostly, it's really even between the sewer and water fees. We spend about 10% on capital every year. And then our expenditures from the enterprise funds, really the vast majority of them, as you can see, 25%, goes towards the GSLD assessment. 14% are the indirect costs, and those get transferred to the regular budget. And that's to pay for employee costs like health insurance or whatever other benefits they have. It pays for a portion of, say, Lynn and the treasurer's office and other things that go to support those enterprise funds.
So, can I ask
Of course.
it's not a direct enterprise fund question, but it sparked this question because we no longer have the Stevens Estate Enterprise Fund.
Yeah.
So my question is, how is that new endeavor going?
I'm going to talk about it in
You-
just 2 slides.
Oh, see?
Because we're going to have some action at town meeting that I'm going to tell you about.
All right, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. And then just to talk quickly about what our reserves look like and some of the potential town meeting transfers you're going to see. For our stabilization account balance, we're at about 5.4 million. You'll see an appropriation of 299,000. We try to keep it at 5% of the general fund budget from the year before. Is that right? That's right. Okay. For the capital stabilization account is at 4.5 million. It's actually really exciting because it's going to allow us to really use that to do things for facilities master plan 2 and alleviate some of the design costs that we don't want to have to put on the regular budget. For fiscal year '24, we're going to appropriate 1.3 million into that, so 346,000 will be from free cash, but $1 million will be a transfer from the general fund debt reserve. So remember, we're still saving debt, right? So we've got a debt payment in our general fund budget that we're not using because we haven't taken the debt for the middle school yet. It will just sit in our budget if we don't transfer it, so we may as well save it. So we're transferring it over through our town meeting through a motion. Our OPEB trust fund balance is 5.5 million. We're making a $75,000 appropriation into that. Our OPEB liability currently is $112 million. I got really excited the other day and ran into Lynn, and I said, do you know that our OPEB liability reduced from 144 million to 112 million? And she's like, yeah, because of interest. Everybody's did. And I was like, oh. I'm like, can't we celebrate for a minute? I was so excited. But it is nice to see that number going down a little bit.
Whatever the reason, right?
Whatever the reason, yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah. If we can get under 100 million, I'd feel really good. Our special ed stabilization account balance is 764,000, so we have not used that since I've been here. It is an emergency account for special ed. If we have somebody transfer in, that's a large cost that we didn't expect, or transportation cost that we didn't realize we were going to have. We have been encouraging the school department to utilize the reserve account, the finance committee reserve account, if that happens, because it really is an operating budget expense. And so going into the special ed stabilization balance could create a structural deficit if we use it too often. So we try to avoid it. I'm leaving it in there because, God forbid, we have some kind of transportation issue or something, right? We want to be able to have something there, but we're trying not to use that, and that's why we haven't utilized it. And then our free cash was certified at 12.7 million.
Maybe we haven't been using it because of the preschool's been in existence for a certain amount of years now.
Yeah,
I mean,
helps.
maybe that's finally contributing towards not having to use this
Could be.
anymore because we're not doing outplacements as much.
Yeah.
I don't
They're
know.
definitely doing more internal placement now.
Yeah.
And
That was the whole, one of the
Yeah.
whole points of it was to keep
Something.
people
Yeah,
in
Going
town.
in the right direction.
yeah.
Yeah.
They've got a great special ed team. I mean, they
Oh,
do a
they
great job
do.
with placements and internal
Yeah.
programming, so, yeah. So but that's all been good news. And they haven't had to come to you to use the reserve, so something's going on.
Something's going right, right?
And then, so free cash available after appropriations tells you a little bit about the Stevens Estate now. So we are going to have 3 articles that are going to be using free cash that we know of. There might be a couple of more that have come to my attention since I made this slide, and I'll tell you about them in a second. The rolling stock DPW, so what happened is that, as you know, our capital articles are about $25,000 each. It has to be over 25,000. DPW had some small items like a mower, little things like that, that were less than 25,000, but they had enough of them that they added up to 119,000. They had asked for them in the operating budget. We had to make some cuts, as you know. And, we were like, why would we put that in the operating budget and increase the operating budget by 119,000 when we have free cash to use? So, well, it doesn't fit into the capital. We're going to create a separate rolling stock DPW. I will tell you, last year, if you remember correctly, we created a new revolving account for rolling stock. Up to then, we had been trading our vehicles in. Yeah, and we were getting like $500 or $600 a vehicle.
Yep.
Now we're selling them on Unibid, and we just got $12,600 for one of our Chargers. We got like
Nice.
$6,000 for a Chevy Nova. It's like a '97 Chevy Nova. I mean, it's been crazy, but we've really been making a lot of money on what we're selling by auction. So that money, as that money adds up, we'll be able to use it to buy some of these vehicles and even offset the cost of some of them.
Cool.
Which is huge.
That's very
It's been-
smart.
It's been a big kind of laughing joke because we all didn't agree on whether or not we should do it. Now that it's working, we'd like to push it in everybody's faces.
Everybody's, yeah.
Everyone's
Yeah,
on board now.
That's right.
No, it's been really
Process behind
positive.
Getting there. How did you arrive at deciding to go away from, selling the vehicles for 500 to utilizing a different resource? What was
Yeah, so if your vehicle is valued at more than $10,000, you're really not supposed to, you're supposed to go out to bid, right? So you're supposed to at least have it auctioned. It bothered me how little we were getting for the trade-ins. So I'm like, why are we only getting this small amount for the trade-ins? And to be fair, a lot of the time, especially our police vehicles and the DPW vehicles, are not in great condition. So, I guess I can understand they don't have back seats sometimes, like
Right.
there's a hole in the roof,
Basic
right? Yeah.
items.
So I was like, I guess, but
That's
I,
200,000 miles.
yeah, but in this market, there's no used cars.
Yes.
So I had done this in the last community I worked in too, and it had been effective. So I'm like, let's try it, right?
Yep.
If it doesn't work, then we don't have to keep doing it. And it's been working for the last 6 months. So
Well, I think that's remarkable. I think some of the frustration about state government, you're not incentivized to do things such as this because there's a risk associated with it. There's more work associated with it.
yeah, it's
So
definitely
it's
more
good
work.
to, yes. So it's good to see that,
Yeah.
that you have looked outside the box to utilize a resource to bring in capital which would not have been realized but not for that. So,
Yeah, it's been good.
yeah.
And if you guys are interested, you can buy all kinds of weird stuff on this website. So somebody was selling their plants
Just
the other
drive the
day.
bid
yeah,
up.
it's so interesting. But
What's
it's
the
fun.
website again?
Unibid, MUNIBID.
Oh,
The town of-
good.
yeah.
I'm interested now. He's writing it down.
It's super interesting. The town of Bedford was selling an entire pallet of windshield wipers. So I was joking with the Bedford town manager. I'm like, "What are you guys doing down there?" But this really interesting, weird stuff that towns just have, and they're kind of trying to get rid of, and they want to do it competitively.
That's awesome.
Like when I first started in this business, we held auctions. So we would advertise in the newspaper, and then we would auction the vehicles off and live. So this is actually much better than that. And a lot of the time, it's the detectives' cars. So it's not even always a Charger. Sometimes it's some car that we were using undercover. So it's really been interesting.
Like a Ferrari or something?
It's not usually a Ferrari.
Acura's
We've got a minivan. Yeah, we had a minivan. We've had some really interesting cars. So if anyone's looking for a car, Munibid is the way. I think we have one up right now. Munibid is the place to go.
Monday to get one. Okay, one.
Pay for one, yeah. So it's been good. So the Stevens estate. The Stevens estate, DOR did not like how we were handling the funding of the Stevens estate, so they have asked us to. Yeah, they've told us that they.
Hold on, should we back up a little bit?
Yeah.
What did they not like?
They didn't like the revolving account. They
Okay.
did not want us to do it through a revolving account. So what they asked us to close it out, which we did.
Wait, hold on a second. I'm sorry to interrupt, but why couldn't they have told us that?
They've given. I love DOR, but they've given us a little bit of a hard time about the Stevens estate for the last 3 years. I don't know why. They weren't. Yeah, they weren't that impressed that we were running a.
No, I remember. Yeah.
And I think they just. Yeah, and I think it's just kind of shining a light on it, and that's
Okay,
okay.
so now
It's
they're-
fine.
okay.
Yes. So they asked us to close out the revolving account and to file special legislation to create a revolving account. So we'll be doing that at town meeting. So basically, it's a home rule petition. It's already
Yep.
drafted. You'll vote in at town meeting, and it will create the revolving account. So that's fine. So basically, what we did was we closed out the revolving account. Fiscal year '23, there was $372,000 in it. Fiscal year '24, $107,000 has come in revenue from the Stevens estate. Basically, that's after we paid out the utilities, because you remember correctly, under the contract,
Yep.
we pay the utilities. So you'll see 2 articles at town meeting. One will be $372,000 transferred for fiscal year '23, and then another one will be $107,000 transferred for fiscal year '24. And that's just making sure that we're still using all the money for the Stevens estate for the Stevens estate,
Right,
like
yeah.
we said we would. And so it's not a big deal, but it does create a little bit of work for us. and a lot of work for Lynn. But it's actually, so it's been working out really well.
Good.
We, they did not get above the threshold this year to have to pay anything above their management payment.
Yep.
But they do anticipate that they will be above the threshold next year based on their
Great.
bookings to pay above the management payment,
Great.
which is huge.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been there or not, but they've done an extensive renovation. They donated the renovation they did in the back, so they actually did that
Oh,
at their
wow.
cost, yeah. We've actually done a ton of repairs with them. We had a capital group come in, and they did an analysis. Actually, it wasn't as bad as we all thought.
Really?
Although we did find out that most of the buildings were not actually named what we've been calling them for the last 20 years, so that was exciting. Like the carriage house
Yeah.
is actually not, it's called the stables, and the garage is actually only the carriage house, so we're trying to all get used to these new names.
Okay.
Yeah, the gatehouse is actually almost entirely renovated now.
I noticed when I dropped my kids off at the high school that there's been a lot of work.
Yeah, it's almost
There.
entirely renovated, and
What will that be used for?
a groundskeeper is going to be living
Oh,
there
okay.
because they
Cool.
want to make sure somebody's there all the time taking care of the property.
great.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty amazing partnership. We're going to be doing a walkthrough of the gatehouse once they finish it so people can see it. The last thing that we're kind of working on right now, and actually interestingly, we were trying to come up with a 5-year capital plan, but we really got a ton of things done this year. So we're really going to be working next on the stabilization of the stables. So there is some issues, stability issues with that, and Laurie has been working on a grant to the State Historical Commission for that. So it's been really very fruitful, so we're pretty excited.
Great.
And then we have $6.1 million in regular capital. We'll have the middle school, which is approximately $21 million. We're getting a final number on that now. And at the end of town meeting, we'll have $5.1 million left in free cash. The one other article I think may come up is that the 400 Great Pond Road Committee is still meeting. They are supposed to make a recommendation by March. Their public meeting is tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're gonna recommend, but I plan to put a warrant article on so that there's something. And then we'll kind of see where they go from there. So they've met a lot. They've been working very hard. And then that's the budget. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. If you have questions for individual departments or department heads that you want to see that department, I'm happy to come with them. And
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any additional questions? I know we kind of asked a bunch along the way, but anything else additional? Is there anything about, we're gonna vote on the capital plan tonight? Is there anything that either one of you would like to throw out there for us on that?
yeah, no changes, right? We presented it to the tribal board, right? I was trying to remember.
Yep.
That feels like 100 years ago
it
now,
does,
right?
yeah.
There's no changes to it at all. The only thing that could possibly change, like I said, could be the amount of the middle school. We're just meeting with the consultant to get the best possible number. He seems to think we're in line, but we're
So
trying to.
should we wait?
So I think I'll have a better number within the next 2 weeks if you don't want to vote tonight.
Is that okay
can
with
wait.
you?
Yeah, you can wait.
Okay, I'd rather wait if that's
Which is
okay.
fine.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
does
That's
anybody have any
absolutely fine.
objections to that?
Because
Okay,
that way
good,
we-
yeah, I'd rather have the
Yeah.
more accurate numbers.
Because that way you
Yeah.
can make your motion with the new amount.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And I'll just remind you, the warrant is open now, and it closes March 13th at 4:30.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so we got some work to do.
Yeah, we gotta write some stuff for the warrant.
We do. All right, well, good. Well, then, I don't think we have any additional questions. Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
And if we do have any questions that come up or want to talk to any department directors, we'll let you know. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So then our next item is the vote on the capital improvement plan, which I think we have all agreed we're going to forego this evening. We're going to table that, yep. So then the next item, is the approval of minutes from our January 18th, 2023 meeting. I was not at that meeting, so I will not vote on that, but I know the minutes were in our packets. If anybody has a motion, I certainly would accept.
I mean, it was
That-
intense and complicated.
Was it? Yeah. Well,
Great job.
All
covering
20
for it.
minutes of it.
I'm glad I missed it. Well, if it's any comfort, I was sick in bed, so.
You were, you poor thing. That's awful.
But anyway, anybody have
I'll
a,
vote to approve
Dustin?
the minutes of January 18th.
thank you, Dustin. We have a second, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Then we have approved the minutes from our January 18th meeting, and we have, well, before we take item 7 there, does anybody have any other issues for discussion?
Well, the warrant is coming up. That's quicker than you think.
So that's a lot quicker than I mean, that's a month.
Yeah, that's a month. So we have to be thinking like, what are we going to write? We have to put together a warrant.
We do.
We have to pick topics and
We
so.
have to put together a letter.
We have to put together a letter
Yeah.
for every department.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what, so you might,
But that's not the same March 13th date, if I
No,
recall.
that's right.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But it is the time
But-
to start thinking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
Right,
sure,
but it's-
sure,
yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you are correct. But it's like, oh,
No, it's just that it comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's
comes up
coming
quick.
up
No, but
fast,
you're right.
so-
We have a later
gotta
due
think
date.
about what interests y'all and what do you want to do and.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we certainly, if you liked what you did last year, and Keith, you weren't here, but we put together a letter to accompany the budget at the town meeting that just outlines it from our perspective to give to the people at town meeting. And what we have traditionally done in the finance committee is there are sort of some set sections, and we sort of divvy them up among us and each take a section or partner with someone. Usually we have at least 2 people on the education section. And then you write it, and then you send it in to Chris and I, and we mesh them all together, make it one voice and that sort of thing. And then we go over it here, make sure that we're all in agreement, vote to send that, and then we'll send it we'll get it in the budget and the warrant articles so that it's ready. So I will get you a copy of last year's so you can see that.
Yep.
And you can see if there's any topics that interest you.
You can see it online too, but like,
Oh, yeah,
it doesn't look like there's any hot, like last year, it was Royal Crest, of course, so somebody had to do that, and then. one year-
Amazon as well?
We did
Amazon
that
as well.
the year before,
And
yeah.
the Stevens estate was a big deal, and, like, just what is the state of that, and what happened, and where did the money go, and what was resolved, and how, that sort of thing. But there's always fixed costs and revenue, and there's the enterprise funds, which is, of course, water,
Education.
and then there's the, the schools. But that's basically, and OPEB is another one, we usually blurb about that, which isn't such a big deal.
So this year seems to be pretty standard? Or
Yeah, I
there
don't
aren't any huge,
It doesn't
It
seem
doesn't
like-
appear to be. I
one-time
mean,
events
so
that-
we'll know when the warrant closes, right?
Yeah.
I would expect that that if anything come up, we would probably be asked to give an opinion on whatever they're gonna do with 400 Great Pond Road.
Yeah.
I think that would be,
I don't know, maybe comments on master plan 2? I mean, like how that's going or where it's heading?
Maybe.
Maybe.
maybe we could talk about that,
Yeah.
right? If we, as a committee, wanna, talk about
Voice an opinion
anything,
on it.
We
Yeah.
can.
say that again, I'm sorry?
Voice an opinion
Voice
on
an
it.
opi- okay.
Yeah, and it's just like, what do we think that this is? How is it? Because basically, it's like we're letting the community know, like, what's our recommendation? What do we think about that? Because in past years, it's like, we're uneasy about this part of the budget.
Okay.
This makes us nervous that we're
Yeah.
heading in this direction because we're going to have a real problem with this. And then there's other times it's like, this is kind of amazing. Look what happened. This is great. This has been hugely successful. I mean,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
So it,
I was to say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say as a suggestion, either at this meeting or the next meeting, perhaps we should just kind of put on a piece of paper who did what sections last year and use that
Yeah.
as a starting point.
I can
Yeah.
absolutely do that for our next meeting.
And see if we want to keep the same things or shift anything, so we can see what the list is and who did what last year. And
You got it.
some people have left out the committee, so obviously
Yeah.
you can't exactly replicate what we
and-
did
and
last year.
For all the folks who are not here, they get.
They get,
They get last choice? Oh,
Right.
you're alone today on education.
no, we wouldn't do that to anybody, I don't think. I don't think we do that.
Why is recommendations written in crayon this year?
Seems appropriate.
Okay. I'm trying to see where I know it's on our website, our letter, but I'll find it and get it to you.
Thank
In
you.
any event, no problem. So with that said, I think our last item is a motion for, or a possible motion for adjournment, if anybody would be so nice as to put something forward, anybody?
So our next meeting is, sorry, so our next meeting is in about 2 weeks?
I think that's right. I don't have that handy.
Okay, but then we'll decide at that meeting who's doing what.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. So I heard a
I will
meeting.
make a motion to adjourn.
We have a second by Chris, made by Dustin. All those in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned at 7:51.